What up, familia? Is your favorite Puerto Rican Brooklyn Philly here with another message. Today is Thursday, October 17th, and today is the day of the full moon in Aries, super moon to be exact. And I just wanted to come out here to my favorite spot and really just ask Spirit what messages, right? Leave it open to see what messages want to come through for the collective for this. I want to say beautiful energy, right? I want us to take advantage of all this beautiful energy has to offer us. And what better way than to ask, right? Ask and you shall receive. Spirit, thank you. We want to know what messages you would have for us, particularly to pay attention to during this beautiful super moon, full moon in Aries. Thank you in advance. This is unbelievable. Union. This card, if you watch the video I uploaded from yesterday, this is the card that came out. It's almost like I'm hearing Spirit say it. I said what I said. Interesting. I won't lie, though, in my reflection, because I went back and I watched the video later that evening. And of course, when you watch videos, I don't know if this happens to other people, but I know that when I watch the video, there's always things that I felt that I could have expounded upon, and other messages that came through as I reviewed the video. And what became very evident and very clear to me, particularly about this union card, was this and I believe I did see that I touched on it in the previous video, but it was just this real intentionality with understanding this union within ourselves, right? This union between our masculine and our feminine aspects, right? Between our shadow and our light, right? And I'm reminded that yesterday I watched the movie Us for the first time, and in that movie there were clones of the families, right? And the actress said, there were two little girls, and the one little girl got presents and was warm, and the other little girl got cut up and was cold, right? And it was interesting because it was describing to me, when I kept hearing her in the monologue, that she was almost speaking of her shadow self, right? Like I wouldn't say that's what she was doing, but that's what I began to think about as a viewer, how my shadow aspects of myself would feel, right? In those moments when I repress them, when I have subjected them to be relegated to the bottom of my consciousness, right? My subconscious. When I've neglected them and felt ashamed of them and hid them away, right? Interestingly enough. So this union card is very much for me today addressing that, right? Looking at ourselves, right? And looking at ourselves in the eye, right? Interestingly enough, I also have found myself hearing songs that are particularly or typically, sung to another, right? To your lover. And I'm singing them to myself. Today it was this song by Drew Hill, I Never Make a Promise That I Can't Keep. And it was initially, I found myself crying, I'll be vulnerable, and saying to myself, I won't break a promise to you again, Marilyn, right? Meaning myself. And that, I will love you, you're stuck with me. Like all of the lyrics, they became very profound. And I claimed them for myself, which, in years prior, I would have either that song dedicated to me or dedicated to another. But this time it was, me dedicating it to myself. And it was pretty powerful, right? I'll also be vulnerable enough to admit that most of the relationships I had encountered in my life were, as a result of trauma bonding and limerence, versus, true unconditional love. And again, that was no shade or judgment against myself. That wasn't to beat myself up or anything, but it was just this, recognition and acknowledgement that there is a difference, right? Between love and limerence, codependency and autonomy, that there is this thing called trauma bonding. And yesterday I mentioned about finding oneself in relationships with people who are emotionally unavailable, and coming to the conclusion that that you may be emotionally unavailable, hence that's why you attract people who are emotionally unavailable. And the highs I'm hearing it offers to have such a relationship in the inception, it keeps things pretty light, right? And pretty easy to stay in the superficial. I think that, we're accustomed, and for, it's appropriate reasons for it as well, to remain pretty much, on a superficial level with most people we encounter. But if we want to deepen relationships, they would have to go, to the depths, right? They could not survive, remaining in the superficial. And one of the things that I am also realize and recognize, that in order for one to be open and honest and vulnerable, it would require one being comfortable to be open and honest and vulnerable with oneself, and really understanding who we are, and in order to connect authentically with others. So I believe some of that came across in the message yesterday, but I guess Spirit wants to place emphasis, right? And then I'm hearing again, this is imperative in order to have healthy relationships, right? Whether it's platonic or romantic, right? Familial, or or even colleagues. You must be authentically yourself. Know that you are worthy of love, and then and only then can you truly enter into a partnership, a divine union with others, right? But you must first encounter that union within yourself. And I want to say easier said than done, right? It does take work, especially if you have gone through some things, right? And those things have caused you to doubt, right? Yourself, and even disassociate from yourself. Um, so, but I'm hearing, it can be done, right? I'm hearing it's not an impossible feat, right? It's definitely one that would need to be worked towards, but it's definitely possible. And I can attest to that. I've seen how much I've grown, and it's come under the realization, and not always in the greatest ways, right? Some tower moments hit a little harder than others. Sometimes divinity had to step in with judgment, and I'm grateful, for that mercy and love that stepped in when I you know didn't know how to do it on my own, yeah, for lack of a better word. So but the results have been and continue to be phenomenal, and I expect them to even get greater the more I grow and learn, and and develop these new unions, right? So yeah, interesting. The second card that flew out with union is fear, right? So spirit today wants to address this fear, right? I'm really perplexed by the alignment of the fingers on this individual's face, because for me, although it exemplifies at first look one person, at the same time I feel like it kind of exposes two sides, two individuals, right? The way these connect that way. And yeah, for some reason, and again, I'm hearing again, just like the movie Us, right? It wanted to kind of say that these duplicates of and I think she said, she used the word, they were tethered together, right? These shadows with each human being, right? There is something about that. Again, it's about the fear of maybe not addressing or really looking at those aspects of ourselves that cause us fear, right? Fear of, well, if I'm vulnerable, if I take off this mask, if I am truly authentic, will I be accepted? Will I be loved unconditionally, even with all my flaws, right? And even some that aren't specifically flaws, but because of certain societal standards or quote unquote norms that have been established, would make oneself view that aspect or that characteristic of ourselves as a flaw. So there is definitely something about it's interesting. Again, like I said, I'm seeing this as two halves of oneself, right? Although I know it's one, but again, for me, it even screams the more this union, speaking of this time of oneself, right? Within oneself, right? Not so much a partnership outside of ourselves, right? So that's interesting. So union and fear to be the first cards, out. And yeah, I'm hearing, don't feel ashamed of the fear, right? It's like, why wouldn't we, right? We live in a world and in a society, for the most part, that tells you be yourself, but then when you try to authentically be yourself, it shuns you, it doesn't accept you, it even mimics or belittles you. So, it's totally understandable to have this fear, right? Because true union requires to truly see one another, right? I mean, look, they're deeply looking into each other's eyes, right? Not turning away, and are embracing it and smiling, you know? And the two shall become one, right? And, we always say that regarding, like, marriage or a partnership, but, I'm hearing, the two within ourselves shall become one, right? And, I'm hearing as children, we are, so free and so okay with being who we are, right? And already come into this world whole that way. But as a result of, the experiences we encounter in life via our caregivers, schools, communities, society, unfortunately, it becomes, yeah, it encourages us, I'm hearing, to wear masks, right? And I was watching this other show, the other Insatiable, and one of her lines was, I've been role playing my entire life that now I don't even know who I am. And again, that's not no shade or tea against anybody. It's just the reality, I think, of, unfortunately, the way the world, that we have created and have set up, and the dynamics that we have set up, particularly, from a very early age, I mean, kids, don't cry, don't, good little girls are good little girls, we begin from a very early age to inundate them with these messages that tell them it's not okay to be yourself. But then we say, be yourself. They learn very quickly, how to manipulate and to get their way. And again, that's not a judgment. It's just the reality. Indulgence. Interesting. So we have union, fear, and then indulgence. Right? Right? Interestingly enough, to indulge in something, automatically my brain wants to say it's a bad thing, right? Which, I want to question myself, well, why is it a bad thing, right? I would say overindulgence of something would necessarily may not fare well for anyone, even if it is something with sweets, right? If I overindulge in sweets, even as a child, you're told, well, no, you can't eat the whole cake because you can get a tummy ache, or the whole tub of ice cream, right? And I'm hearing it like two-pronged, like fear leads to, can lead to indulgence, right? As a coping mechanism. To help, I don't like the word deal with, but to help manage the stressors of such a division within ourselves, right? Because now I'm seeing that, this is a cup. Yesterday it looked like, yeah, but, and this cup, if it's literally there and there is dividing the both of them, right? Is it would be, an obstruction, a division of sorts, split. Kind of like the way these fingers are posing like the same kind of, yeah, feeling for me, emotion. And yeah, this indulgence, yeah. And these are both nines, 9 and 9, right? So I'm hearing like if we go into union, like a trauma bond, based on fear, we would treat it like an indulgence, right? Just a sense of, I'm hearing like temporal gratification, right? A dopamine hit of sorts, right? Because what are you indulging in, And for some, it could be as detrimental as drugs and alcohol. Right now, I'm hearing escapism, right? I mean, because if you think about it, any sort of disembodiment within ourselves, I'm hearing schism within ourselves. How couldn't that create, fear, right? And a need to cope. I keep hearing cope. And again, I'm hearing none of these things in and of themselves are like, maybe that's why I didn't want to say good or bad earlier, like are in and of themselves evil or bad, right? To indulge, in something that we enjoy can actually be a good thing at times. Here we go. I don't want to use good, bad, but can, and it can be beneficial. Fear is not a negative emotion only. When we allow fear to overtake and to be the primary curse of whatever decisions we're going to make or to dictate our lives, that's when it becomes, detrimental. But fear can alert us to avoiding certain dangers and pitfalls. It's actually can be beneficial. Union, right? How many times have we heard two are better than one, right? Can be better than one, right? But it seems that spirit is pointing out when they're over emphasized, overutilized, over depended on, right? Depended upon. And especially if it's not the union is not solidified and settled within oneself, which would be a big indicator, right? A big red flag, to say, uh-oh, you know, this is definitely going to bring these things in excess as a result. At the bottom of the deck, honesty. Interesting. And it's very interesting that they would use all of these eggs. And I just noticed that they're all multicolored and filled, like, right, would look like they're filled with vibrancy and energy and beauty. And then there's this one that is not painted. Yeah, I just heard that song. One of these things just don't belong here. One of these things just ain't the same. Now, I'm taking issue with the fact that it's a brown egg, but that's another story. I mean, that's my own. But interestingly enough, honesty, which is the number 2, which again I would ascribe to union, right? But then also to the high priestess for me, in terms of like intuition and like a deep knowing, a deep sense of knowing, right? And maybe it's just as simple as, this is what I'm hearing now, that this full moon is calling for us to, very much like yesterday, right, do some self-reflection, to really honestly assess where we are in the great scheme of, I was going to say things or life, but, maybe just within your own household, or, and being honest with yourself, as of, acknowledging, am I going in the direction that I want to go? Am I living the life that I, truly deserve, that is mine's by birthright, right? What do I believe about myself? All of these other eggs are painting it. Do I not believe I should have, the ability to be creative and express myself? Addressing, what do I fear? If you can admit to yourself that you tend to trauma bond, why do I trauma bond? What is at the root of that? How can I release that, right, during this full moon? Am I dealing with issues of shame, guilt, unworthiness, feeling unlovable? Acknowledging that, asking maybe why, and then releasing. And like most things, it's a process, right? And we can seek help. We don't have to do it by ourselves. We can ask for professional help, like from a therapist or a counselor or a psychiatrist, friends, family, if we feel comfortable. But the first step would be self-acknowledgement, self-reflection. I need to admit it to myself, be honest with myself. That would be the first step. And then, in my case, I would always say cry out for help, right? And I didn't always feel like I could trust people, for a lot of reasons, right? My own fears. But the one thing, my disclaimer is, I felt I could trust divinity, right? So I would cry out to divinity. and say, I need your help. I don't know how to release this, or I don't know, why I keep running into these situations, or, and I no longer want to be there anymore. I mean, that's literally what I had to do, And in the 50 years that I've been alive, there's not one time I can say, or that I can recall, where when I asked for help, I didn't receive it. It didn't always come in the ways I thought it may or needed to come, but when I look back and think things over, as we would say, right, help came, right? And some resource, some information, some revelation, some download, some friend, some stranger, some movie, some song, something came which provided the illumination and the clarity and the understanding that I needed to grow and look at it from a different perspective and minimize the frequency of some of the mess I used to get into. So yeah, there's this need for looking at these things and being honest with ourselves, right? I mean, I know for myself too, yeah. One of the things that I would do is, sorry, baby. One of the things that I would do is literally, escape, numb through indulging, right? Indulging was a way, a form for me to, not feel initially the pain, right? That I didn't want to address, right? And it would be through food, through sex, through shopping, through television, anything that would take me outside of myself, right? Anything that would shift the focus away from those things I was fearful of addressing, right? Those, what some would call the monsters under the bed, or the boogeymen in the closets, right? And one of the things that, I have really become aware of now, that those things are really within me. And those things I feared the most was aspects of myself that I was taught, in so many, many ways, or different ways, as a result of different experiences, to dislike about myself, to shun myself for, to feel shame, about. And what I found out was that these situations that I found myself repeatedly in was, although they hurt like hell, and at the time I didn't want them, but they were my mercy and grace, in the sense that had it not been for those triggers being brought to the light via these calamities and catastrophes that I found myself in, I wouldn't know to come, to I was gonna say confront, but I realized it wasn't about confronting them. Initially, yeah, I did try that. Like, you try to, like, exercise, like an exorcism, exercise it out of you. But I'm talking about me. I'm talking about parts of me that I am rejecting. And how can I say I want to be whole and operate as a whole being if I am rejecting aspects of myself? These shadow parts are a part of me, right? This body that I would, complain about, or different areas of my stomach is not separate from me, that is a part of me. My arms, the fat here is not apart from me. it is a part of my arm. So if I am shunning that and talking negatively about it and wishing it away, you know, that would hurt anyone's feelings, right? That would not feel good to anyone. So if I'm doing it to myself, yeah. And you know, what I found was that those shadow parts of me, you know, refused to be silenced anymore. They said, enough is enough. You know, you will not dismiss me anymore. You will no longer invalidate me, you know. And it's almost like I heard them say to me, it's one thing for others to do that to me. And, you know, I'm already kind of angry at you that you allowed others, right? And again, no judge, no tea. I wasn't beating myself up, but it was just some, you know, realizations, right, that I believe were revealed by spirit to me and my ancestors to tell me. But now, you know, I'm to the point where I'm no longer not just allowing outsiders to treat me that way, right? Because I started putting boundaries, right? I started saying, oh no, hold up, I'm not going to get treated like that. But then it came to being honest that, hold up, well, why am I treating myself that way? Why am I talking to myself that way? Why am I criticizing myself that way? Why am I feeling ashamed about those things about myself in that way? You know, it's one thing for me to say, you know, don't discriminate against me because of this, that, and the other. But then I discriminated myself, right? I internalized some of those messages to the point where I oppressed myself and, you know, discriminated against myself in different, you know, ways. So I had to come to that conclusion and that acknowledgement. And, you know, one of my, and this is all channeling. I mean, I haven't pulled cards yet, but one of my realizations was as, you know, I was beginning to accept more and more my ability or acknowledge what some would call the gift of being a medium, right? And having the ability to interact and speak and hear from the dead. And one of the things I remember clearly being told was, well, you know, mediumship 101 requires for you to speak to those dead parts of yourself, right, that you have relegated to its death, right, that you have buried, right. Let's talk to those dead spaces and places within you first, which was interesting. And then the second realization was, now that we've kind of like with the judgment card in tarot, now that we have exhumed, I think, the bodies, right, those dead places and spaces within you, and now that you are saying to them, I love you and I accept you and I apologize, I should have never you know, hid you that way. It's like having a child and then hiding them in the basement or in the attic because they don't meet, you know, societal norms or standards of beauty or character or whatever. And then, you know, not wondering why that child like is angry at you, right? Because you didn't let it go out and play like with the other kids, or didn't, you know, I realized I did that to parts of myself. So now here I am, I brought them up. So now they're sitting at this table and they want to be heard. So the next part was kind of having what I call a family intervention, because now that they all came up to the surface and are declaring no one's going to treat me like that anymore, I'm not going to be putting myself in that space anymore and everything. And then like the ultimate was, not even you, body, not even you, you know what I mean? You're not going to do this to me anymore either. It was like they were all in fight or flight or fawn or like the, you know, these survival modes. And now I found that these inner parts of me were fighting each other, even though they wanted the same goal. So I had to have like a family intervention and say, hey, we got to cooperate with one another. At the end of the day, we're one, and we want the same thing. We have a similar goal in mind. And I get fear. You think it should be done this way, and you, Miss Perfectionist over here, thinks this is the best. But let's work together for the best course of action for our overall wellness and wholeness. And I know that might sound maybe crazy to people, but it's literally what I needed to do. And I then began to also, as I began to give grace to, let's say, that part of me, fear, that was always terrified and thought the worst only could happen. When I asked it to, when I thanked it, first of all, for all of these years trying to protect me, and asked for it to gracefully bow down, and not bow down, but, give up its seat and trust that, I won't do those same things again to it. I'm asking it to rest now, right? Not in this tomb of dismissal, but now almost, I call it the altar within, where now those places, those aspects of me, I've let them know they have a place. I thank them, right? And now I have like this altar where I, the same way where, with my living altar of my ancestors, where you would give it a glass of water if, that's what you would do. That's what I would do. That's what I do. My disclaimer, right? And light a candle and, thank it for all it is done, for our lineage and for me to get to where I'm at today. So this veneration, this homage is very similar, right, to this altar within. Is kind of like learning to take care of the altar within me as well as the altar outside of me with my ancestors and guides and so forth. So interesting. I didn't know it would go into this, or that I would share all of that, but that's what Spirit wanted me to share. Yeah, it's a process. I'm hearing be compassionate with yourself as you're being honest, right? Speak to yourself as you would a friend or someone you love dearly, right? That would come to you and say, listen, I need to share this. I want to be honest. I've realized this and this and this about myself. Would you come out and tell that person, oh, you're this horrible person? Or no, you would show some, compassion, some grace, some mercy, and even, hopefully some unconditional love. So I'm hearing make sure you do that for yourself as well. Just interestingly enough, since we dove into all of that, I want to just pull some cards to see what else coming. Before I show this card, I want to say too that these things that I kind of talked about in terms of having a family intervention with myself, almost everything I touched upon, interestingly enough, there's like actual therapies, or so like cognitive behavioral therapy and family systems therapy and things that do or utilize those similar forms, right, in applying therapy to and utilizing therapy in their sessions with individuals, helping them. So although it may sound a little, it really isn't, strange, I would want to say, but it really isn't. And it was interesting that as I would be revealed these things personally for myself, then, spirit would validate it with, then all of a sudden I would find a, YouTube video or an article or journal or something that would corroborate, the technique or the download that I was given and applying in my life with some kind of like, research, whether it was neurologically, biologically, or psychologically, right? So just interesting. Spirit is dope. But this card came out yesterday too. I think I showed it as like one of the underlying cards, I believe. I'm not sure. Yeah. So the Seven of Wands, first thing I heard, you're protected, right? But it's interesting because, typically in the Rider-Waite-Smith, we see the Seven of Wands is usually an individual with one wand over. You don't see the people holding the other 6 wands, but there's 6 wands like coming up under, right? And there, I just got chills on top. And it usually, we tend to interpret it as someone who is overcome, able to defeat, withstand those 6 wands that are coming up against it, right? Also, that individual is protected, right? And in some interpretations as well. This one, interestingly enough, right? It's just kind of like that brown egg in the batch, It's, what I'm hearing is almost, because this person is, when I look at this individual, I think of a circus character, right? This is, to me, this is the strong man in a circus, right? He's exemplifying his strength, right? And it's interesting that, we would have this individual in a circus, right? Because normally when you think of circus, you think of, trigger warning, I don't know, I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but, automatically people like, oh, you're a circus freak, right? It's individuals who have, certain abilities or features that are not the norm, right? But I'm smiling because it's almost like what I'm hearing, this is your superpower. The fact that you're not like everybody else, right? I mean, the fact that this isn't like everybody else, it's what makes it stand out from the rest, right? The fact that, you have this non-human strength, right, is what stands you out from everybody else. This is, like, I just keep hearing, your unique superpower, right? This is your the way you defeat the other 6 wands under you. This is the way you protect yourself, right? Yeah. Right? Because again, normally we're so fearful of showing who we really are. Hence why, we go into all these forms of escapism and indulgences. But what's interesting and what's so beautiful is those very things that and I'm hearing like Dumbo, right? So in the movie Dumbo, Dumbo's ears is who also was from a circus, interestingly enough. I don't know. Spirit is like, I don't know. I just heard the Universal Circus, like the dopest circus in the world, right? And we would allow ourselves to just be, I just got chills. Oh, alhamdulillah. Like who we really are, how beautiful, Now I'm hearing Celia Cruz's song, Carnival is a Spanish song where she admonishes us to live life that way, like a carnival, right? Like a carnival, a circus of sorts. But it's like Dumbo, the very thing that they used against him and teased them about is the very thing that then gave him the ability to fly, right? And then made him infamous, right? He became like Dumbo, the flying elephant, right? Or I was gonna say Frosty, not Frosty, Rudolph, right? Rudolph with his red nose. I've said this before, right? I mean, again, initially he became this freak of sorts that then everybody, go lay down, big boy, go lay down, that then was needed, right? So it's like this full moon is really encouraging us to be ourselves, right? To truly love and embrace, who we are, right? To understand that there is no other like you, that the world needs you to be you. And, we suffer, right? When we don't have you, right? Yeah. Wait a minute. I just had to, at the bottom of the deck, the lovers, right? Talk about union, right? Again, yes, this perfect divine union begins within. And as you can see, it is her, and then this is a bird. She's half bird and half human up here, and then he's half bird and half human up here. It is a future, of unions that are authentic, truly embracing and accepting and acknowledging, all of our quirks and, weird things about ourselves, right? And knowing that they're perfectly imperfect, right? And truly having this unconditional love, and acceptance for self and one another. I say bring on such unions, right? It's beautiful. Okay, yes, okay, big boy, I get you. All right, beloved, please be safe. And until next time, Ashe, Amen, and Amen.